we're not too late. As a matter of fact, I just looked, it says 3 minutes, so, but that's what happens. And I say welcome to everybody that's here today. We're excited to introduce everybody again that's here with the representatives of the manufacturing businesses, and Tom, the gentleman that does all of the great directions of how these products are working and what takes place. And so then what we'll be doing is we'll be doing a little Q&A opportunities where we can ask questions. Some of our producers that are here today too will be standing up and giving some of the testimonies from what they've seen from all the different 3 aspects of all these products and what's taking place. So anyway, we'll introduce this first gentleman. You can come on up. I'm just gonna shut up. because you're next. They don't need to hear me. They like hearing you. Anyway, you can introduce yourself and tell them what you're doing for those who have never met you.
My name is Steve Stumbris. I'm a partner with Purple Cow Organics. I've had the pleasure to meet most of the people in the room. Thrilled to be here again. Also, Ben Schneider is also with Purple Cow. He's the manager of this segment of our company. So Ben's going to be around too if you have any questions. I've been with Purple Cow from the start. It's always nice coming here because, well, the food is always so good, the service is good, but this is really an area, and I think this point came up yesterday when we were doing a presentation. The individual we were speaking to, Todd was there, Sean, Tom, he said, I've never really seen a presentation like this that encompassed the whole program, right? And that's really what we're trying to do here. We're trying to do a whole program approach to return on investment this year and inching your farm in a healthier place. So I want to quote world famous agronomist Todd Ricard. When page 3 on the lower right hand side, it says, I use calcium to fix the soil. Nano-yield particles is a better way to deliver fertilizer and crop protection inputs, and the biology from LiquiLife Plus to make the whole system work. So I'm the biology guy. I'll be starting, and Tom is going to carry on and talk about kind of the rest of the pieces. So Purple Cow is really kind of a concept authored by Seth Godin. One of the things we don't succeed or grow our business unless customers stand up and give a testimony. That's the only way we can grow and achieve success, because it's not important what I say, it's what your friends and neighbors say, and in here, in this area especially, we've had a lot of support in that. So this book is really about doing something remarkable. Your customers tell the story, and you'll stick out like a purple cow in the field ordinary black and white cows. One downside to Purple Cow is people think that it's a manure-based product, and there's a lot of reasons why there's an advantage to not being a manure-based product, and I'll get into that a little bit. But probably the simplest message, if I could share, is we know, biologicals in the industry are complicated. They're kind of hit and miss sometimes, and that's the industry that we live in. But this statement, I think, is what is the reason why the Ericksons would choose to carry a product like ours, is the reason why I can stand up here with confidence and say, farmers increase their chance for success by using a biological that has more species. So 100% plant-based means there's no pathogens. It means you could spray it today, eat your crop tomorrow. 100% plant-based means you're going to have a better balance of bacteria and fungi, and that's a deeper discussion. I'm happy to go into it with anyone. It's a virtually salt-free input, but most importantly, this is really our claim to fame. It's really about microbial diversity, and bacteria and fungal balance. So I have this on here. Probably the most frequent call I'll get from Brad or from Todd or from anyone else we work with is, hey Steve, I came across this product, what do you know about it? And that's great. If you're calling us, me, Ben for that, perfect. The category's a little complicated. A lot of products on the market, they all fall under the word biologicals, but some are byproducts, some are biostimulants. Most fall in the category of limited species. You can see here some of the other products that you might have heard about. Ours is a broad spectrum. So that means literally thousands of species, a couple of thousand species of bacteria, a couple of thousand species of fungi. And even the smartest guys don't know what they all do or how they all interface, but you just increase your chance for success when you have a product that has more species. That was a DNA listing of the products. It would have gone on for 9 minutes. If I show the whole thing, we don't show the whole thing, we show just a segment to kind of give you the impact, really. But that was done, a group associated with Cornell, and we're still learning about all this, right? We don't have the answers, but what I will stake my reputation on, if you bring good biology into your system and good diverse and balanced biology in your system, you're going to have a better chance to succeed. So the reasons why, now some people want to know all the ins and outs, some people want to just have the like the Cliff Notes version. Some people want to know the whole nitrogen cycle, right? It starts as a gas, it goes to a nitrite, then a nitrate, then an amino and a peptide and protein, right? Some people want to know all that. All I can tell you is there's all kinds of microbes in the product that fix gases. Digesting carbon is a critically important part of building aminos and peptides and proteins, cycling, metabolizing, changing from one to another, exchanging. Actually there are microbes that take a mineral held in a really available place to the plant and bring back a hydrogen molecule. Plant protection, the difference between competitive exclusion, biosanitation, and of course it's microbes that change and drive the humification process that make the difference between soil organic matter and soil organic carbon. So these are all the things that farmers rely on, whether we always recognize them or appreciate them or not, but this is really the reason that more species works in your favor. So that was my original quote. This was the panel of experts led by some people that I highly respect were assembled to answer that question, and their answer was more species works in your favor. So you're going to hear me talk a lot about carbon and minerals and biology. In fact, if you've heard me speak before, you might be tired of hearing me talk about carbon and minerals and biology. But really we're trying to get productive soil. And in order to get productive soil, once you get soil productivity, all kinds of other good things happen. Everything that I talk about today is going to be yield, fertility efficiency, nutrient density, and then crop or system health and resilience. And that's, if we're not doing that for you, then we're not doing our job. But soil quality is really 3 key aspects. Physically, and this is where humics, fulvics, calcine come in. You need to get your soil so it can hold air, it can hold water, it can hold minerals, and it can house biology. Because really that's job 1. The chemical side is the minerals. You have a pool of minerals in the soil that are organic. You have pools of minerals in the soil that are inorganic. Crop residues and manures and things like that. You have, that's the difference between in the soil and organic and inorganic. You have fertilizer you're putting down this year, the fertilizer that you put down last year, right? The aspect of the ECO program that is superior in my mind is the fact that the minerals that are put down in this program are delivered in a more economical way. The nanoparticle, we'll get into it more, and Tom's going to talk about it more than I am. The nanoparticle is a superior delivery mechanism for fertilizer and crop protection inputs. And then, of course, the biological side. If you can take all three of those to a better place in your farm, then you're going to have more productive soil. So this is carbon and minerals and biology, and that's why the three together are so important. So a couple guidelines here on fertility efficiency, and we've seen this. You know, we have a specialty crop division. We have retail and landscape. We have row crop, broad acre division. We've seen this over and over again. If you can attach every mineral molecule to a carbon particle and drive the exchange with biology, you'll go from having to use, this is just an example, 100 units to between 60 and 70 units of any fertilizer. I'm standing right in your way, aren't I?
No, it's fine. No, it's fine.
I usually like halfway through I realize that. That's where I get, I just get over my nervousness and I realize that I'm standing right in
I wish I
someone's
could listen to you instead of reading. We've
proven that time and time again. Attach every mineral molecule, and there's a lot of reasons for that. Oftentimes it's about making sure that your mineral is there when your plant needs it, like preventing it from leaching. To a carbon particle, drive the exchange of biology.
Steve, why does carbon do that?
Well, carbon has the ability to hold and immobilize a lot of the minerals. Carbon also is, when you look at a structure of a molecule, you got a circle, and then you've got the line in between. That really represents the carbon. And when you take carbon and you have digested carbon, then you're changing from an amino to a peptide to a protein. So we talk about digested carbon. Even the carbon that's in a liquid carbon has to be further digested in order to, the word metabolize is the Greek word for change. So we're talking about sugars and proteins and nutrient density, and those are secondary metabolites. That's the result of carbon digested and a mineral and an advanced structure. So the difference between a peptide and a protein, a peptide is a small carbon molecule, less than 50 of the bars, the carbon units. Once it gets over that, it grows into a protein. So when we get to, nutrient density is about plant health, and it's also about the number of different ways that you can find an invisible contributor to your bottom line. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. But this is the key to biology and carbon in terms of fertility efficiency. And then you can achieve additional efficiencies with better quality inputs. There's all kinds of different types of nitrogen. I put anhydrous on the bottom and amino on the top in terms of quality, precisionally placing, and then of course split applications.
Question.
Yes.
So talk about carbon, and that's kind of a big deal right now. So we have the carbon that's in our soil, but then there's available carbon, then there's bioavailable. I hear all these terms.
Yep.
And when you talk about this breakdown process of carbon, which if you go buy this available carbon that you can put on your soil, that's going to make your crop so much happier and your biology happier. Which one is that? And then is it digested carbon? How do you sort this out?
Yeah, it's hard when you think about the difference between. I'll start with humics and fulvics. Okay, humics are larger; they're typically a home for biology. Fulvics are smaller; they're typically a food for biology. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's one place to start to make the distinction. The difference between, you've seen this on a soil test. The difference between soil organic matter and soil organic carbon, well, it's biology that drives the humification process. So when you, even humates, right? That's carbon that's broken down. Biology is what drives the humification process. So you can move your organic matter to organic carbon.
Okay.
One of the easiest ways for some to understand it is if you've heard green, brown, and black.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, green is carbon in a plant living form.
Mm-hmm.
Brown is carbon in a residue form. Black is the humified residue that you really need. Now, you can buy a humate, or you can metabolize a humate. Basically, biology can do that. So, so often this is about fixing the foundational challenges so that the rest can happen. Sometimes people want to go from, I have this problem. Funny story. I'm a little off track here, but we worked with a guy for a few years, and it didn't have any life in his soil, and worked, and he said, well, I finally see worms. Great. He says, couldn't I have just gone out and bought worms? But you don't realize that worms are there because what worms eat are there. So it starts at the lowest level and it builds up and builds up and builds up. So the carbon conversation is complex. The important thing is that biology digests carbon, and I think maybe where you're going with this, and this is Tom's area of expertise, some of the new soil test devices out there, the Haney test and some of the regen ag tests that we're using more, especially Tom, are starting to identify different metrics than we've seen on tests in the past. So that's bringing kind of this conversation to the fore as well.
Okay.
Yeah, so your soil organic carbon, which would be your SOC on a Haney test. And if anybody wants, I've got a couple of different Haney tests that we can take a glance at. But that is basically, that's your carbon source that is readily available to the plant to then ultimately be broken down and taken up and made. Because again, a plant can only take up a fulvic acid. It cannot take up anything larger than that. So fulvic is the only way. That's why people have thrown that in. I got it. You have to put fulvic with this because it's the way the plant can take it out. Well, if you throw it with a fulvic with a UAN or urea, or it can't take up. It doesn't take up N. It takes up an amino acid, because that's the only way a plant can take it in. So when you're using anhydrous ammonia, it has to go all the way from NH3 to amino in order for it to get through. So all of those processes have to step in there, and it all is done by biology. It's not done in any other way from that standpoint. So one of the things that we were discussing yesterday, because Sean was a part of it, in Steve's earthworm story. Okay, the first time we ever used calcine, we had a huge impact on earthworms in Arizona. In fact, the farmer had never seen an earthworm in 30 some years. Okay, had no idea what an earthworm casting looked like, nothing. So he put it on, and then he ended up he put on calcine and got the field turned around, and then we ended up getting some river water off of the Colorado. Okay, it had oocytes of earthworms in it. And it came in and they exploded to the point of, it went from basically 0 to 497,700 earthworms. Okay, and if you want to figure out how we counted that, I can give you the professor who did it. Okay, from that standpoint, because there's a way to do this. Where I'm getting at is that we ended up getting protozoa in the soil, and then started bacteria, and then fungi, and then protozoa. Protozoa are the predators in the soil. So what they do is they actually chew on the outside of the oocyte of an earthworm to say, hey, we're here. We're your food source, come get us. And that's what happened, and it just went. So when they went out to water the field the next time in flood irrigation, the people who do the watering came back in and said field possess, because they'd never seen, their Hispanic kelp in Arizona had never seen earthworms, but they were crawling over this, about 4 inches thick, laying in each one of these sites. Okay, so that's when we knew, again, what we were dealing with from a biological standpoint, how it has to come. But that So all of these things produce, because when earthworms take organic matter and pull straw down into its burrow, then it's starting to break that down, and it's the castings that's the most available source. That's why from an organic standpoint, people talk about earthworm casting meals and things like that, because it's such a highly available source of carbon.
The workers were afraid to go back in the field, but they had a whale of a fishing trip.
Yeah, exactly.
So when you think about how to use biology in your system, all right, how you use biology in this ECO program, honor as directly honor as close to seed as possible, as an early foliar, and then as a late foliar resident pass. We're going to focus on the LiquiLife Plus. The ideal per acre recommendation is 3 gallons an acre per year. The program approach is you're much better off getting a gallon in each of those touch points than 3 gallons all at once. And you're going to see, why that's obvious, because the broad spectrum nature of the LiquiLife Plus means that you're doing different things in the spring on the seed, then you are trying to get the minerals and a foliar through the tissue, and then late is crop protection, a lot of times, white molds and whatnot, and then residue breakdown. So by taking the 3 gallons and putting in a gallon here and a gallon here, a gallon here, you're taking really advantage of all the different species at the different times of the year. We know that not every grower is going to find 3 touch points, so you would do a gallon and a half and a gallon and a half, 2 different times. If you're only going to, and a lot of times, this is perfect. They just want to try it once just to see, and usually that's going to be in furrow wet planting, because you can get that instant gratification of seeing roots and seeing emergence. I would do about 2.5 gallons at any one time. This is important, and I'm going to reference some things later. But what is a critical growth stage? It's that time that effective growth is really important to the plant, right? In corn, V5 is a critical growth stage, because in corn at V5 you're establishing the kernel rows, right? And if you can establish 2 more kernel rows, there's 20 bushels. The opportunity is making sure that you've got your carbon and minerals and biology in advance of that critical growth stage, 7 to 10 days, so it gets through that stage with less stress. If it gets through that stage with less stress, that's going to show up on your yield monitor. So every crop has a different set of critical growth stages. So understanding your critical growth stages and making sure that you're timing, your fertility inputs in accordance with that can work in your best interest. And then sometimes, sometimes this doesn't matter until you do that. And you'll see some of the calcium stores. You might have a section of your field which is not farmable until you really do something significant to fix it. And Tom will talk a little bit about that. So let's just go through some examples of that first touch point. Pretty roots. We've all seen pretty roots, so I don't have to go through it. But the important thing here is that this mucilage protects the plant from salts and other things. This root, I'm not good at finding that pointer. This root is going to mine minerals and moisture better than this root.
The red line on there too. Don't worry, Todd was about ready to shoot me the last time I did a presentation with it, so from there.
And so in a dry condition, you can see the previous picture, how that would work in your advantage. And biology, aeration, drainage, this happened to be protein peas in a really, really wet year. So whether, there's certain things that can work in your favor when it's dry, certain things that work in your favor from protection, certain things that work in your favor when it's wet. Sometimes the best trials are the ones that happen by accident. There's a really good example. So we're talking about just the impact of just a little bit of product on the seed. This was not an intended trial. The difference here is 1.5 gallons of LiquiLife, which is really be just like 3/4 of a gallon of LiquiLife plus. And there was a little sea mineral in this mix. The grower does a nice job of having good fertility 2x2, so that's all he put on his on the seed. He drove by this field all year. He saw the streaks. He thought that it was his manure applicator that did a crummy job until the day he went out there to harvest. This is shell corn, and he realized that these streaks were in 16-row increments. He realized that he was having an issue. He thought back the months before now, oh, this is the field where, you know, the equipment was not working. So he just took this is through the window of the combine. These were in 16-row increments, and he jumped down and took a few pictures. But literally the small amount of biology and sea mineral in furrow, he was 16 rows by 43, where the planter was not working, he was significantly less than. So we talk about yield, fertility efficiency, nutrient density, and then plant and system health. You can see this is done, 15 rows, 15 linear feet, every cob, in what looked to be the most apples to apples comparison in this field. So you can see just purely the number of cobs that came out of the ground. I think you probably all know the importance of uniform germination and emergence as it relates to corn. You can see just the size difference. This is an indication that these got out of the ground much more consistently than this. You see tip build, and of course, yield is there. That's the real return on investment from a yield standpoint. But the corn that was planted with biology had a nutrient density component to it that was really significant. That corn, it had 15% more protein when it was planted with biology, 7% more methionine. So these are, okay, we talk about the secondary metabolites and how biology drives that. That is the example of the with and without from the board just before that. So we're starting to talk now about planting, keeping high salt fertilizers away from your seed. We're going to talk about those cases where you can plant with biology only, as long as you got a good fertility program, and sometimes you can plant with carbon and biology into your fertility inputs. But this is interesting. Again, we really are highlighting kind of the downside to some high salt fertilizers on the seed. We were involved in a trial in Maryland. The data you have here has nothing to do with the results of the trial. The data here is simply the 3 controls from the trial. All right? The 3 controls, farm plan, yielded 230. Farm plan with 25 units of nitrogen taken out, 233. Farm plan with 40 units of nitrogen taken out. So no other inputs, just less nitrogen. Surprising, by cutting the nitrogen, you can see the advantages there. One of the guys driving the trial said, we planted in good weather, and we had an extended period of dry weather, and we just must have fried it rust. Here is a third-party trial testimonial that highlights that concept. So you're going to see here that both programs, you've got NPK in the fall, K, 45 gallons of UAN 2 days after planting, 15 gallons of UAN 38 days after planting. The only difference in this trial is going to be biology instead of 624-6. I mean, if you think about this 6 units of nitrogen, you got your bases covered here. Phosphorus, potassium, you've taken that into account. The difference between the 624-6 is 236, The biology and the food source was 247. So this was done, Agritech Consulting in Whitewater, Wisconsin. So you had about a 12 bushel increase just planting with biology instead of high salt fertilizer. But you have to have the rest of your program in place. I have this I think the last, this happens to be Kansas, and this is biology versus liquid nitrogen as well, and you can just see the difference. I know there's not a lot of winter wheat up here, and I know there's not a lot of, I have too many alfalfa slides in this presentation today for this group. I don't think we have any dairy farmers, but you know, I got cheese in my room, and I'm going to talk about alfalfa. I'm a Wisconsin guy. You can just see the difference when you're planting new alfalfa or you're planting winter wheat. There's just no question which of those is going to have a better chance to get through winter. So that's a strategy where you can plant with biology instead of something on the seed, but you have to remember your fertility program has to be tight. You have to have that somewhere because it can't go without. Biology has to have things to work with. And really the strategy is biology right on the seed, germination, immersion, get the roots going. By the time those roots get 2 inches out, they're stronger. They have more mucilage. They can accept the salt, right? They can withstand some of that harshness that you might be using there. So it makes all the sense in the world to do. There's so much energy in the seed itself. A little biology, a little food source is really going to, help get you to that point where it's feeding from the fertilizer that's 2 inches away. So this was a really good trial. There's like 30 different treatments in this trial. It happens to be organic, but I think the message here is going to resonate. What we're talking about now is taking a starter and using carbon and minerals and biology together. Okay. Again, carbon is going to mobilize some things. Biology is going to metabolize in amino form. Biology is going to let you get more goodness from the soil. So there's a lot of advantages to this. There were 30 replicated trials, or treatments in this trial, and 9 of the 30 had this liquid nitrogen in furrow without any other additional second passes. So that's how all of these treatments that have the liquid nitrogen in furrow are highlighted here. All right. You can see this is when the liquid nitrogen was used by itself. This is your return on investment for every dollar. This is when the liquid nitrogen was used with carbon, and this is when the liquid nitrogen was used with carbon and biology. So this is that carbon and minerals and biology and everything you do. I mean, the pattern is unmistakable. The ROI calculations are on nitrogen spent, but this is one of the controls. This is actually the bushels on there was a pattern of 4, I selected one of the nitrogen alone, actually lost the grower money. The bushels and the results of the nitrogen and carbon, but then when you added, literally this was $10 worth of biology into the carbon and nitrogen mix, and you just see that return on investment. So I can comfortably stand here and say that if you can get carbon and minerals and biology into every fertility pass you make, good things happen.
Question for you: when you're talking about adding the carbon, what are you referring to as far as carbon?
So like molasses, liquid carbon,
Humic acid.
humics,
Okay.
Those kind of things.
fulvics. You've got I always
Crystal
remember
carbon.
the crystal carbon, and the one in the 311, right?
311, which is carbon and a fatty acid.
Yeah.
Okay.
They come in both dry forms and liquid forms. There's a liquid supercharger that is a food source and has a little bit of carbon that Erickson's have. So any sort of carbon and all, there's a lot of them.
Yeah. So there's anything that's along sugars, that
Okay.
aspect of it
Yep.
is what is considered in the carbon field. Okay, so taking raffinate, taking the molasses from beets, taking humic acid that some guys have, so there's any number of them, but it's a food source for it. So the bio-supercharger is actually an inverted honey. So we have an inverted sugar in from that standpoint. Okay, so that's what feeds the biology when you get in there from that standpoint.
So, honor as close to seed as possible. Now let's transition to the second touch point, which is foliar applications. The real advantage here is when you look at the efficacy of putting a fertility input in the soil to try to get it through the roots versus through the tissues, right? Minerals are many times more efficiently taken up with the foliar application. This is one study done in California just to show exactly how many times more efficient. It's really, these numbers are how many times more material you would need in the soil as opposed to on the leaf surfaces. And the other advantage is you can have almost an instant impact on, on a crop by doing a foliar application. I mean, it really is as fast as when you think about, during an extended period of dry weather, you get a little rain and, they become happy in hours. I mean, it's really, when you think about it, this is the advantage of the nanoparticle and, why endocytosis, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But this really is the key to fertility efficiencies through the leaf tissue.
Steve, can you back up just a second? So look at that phosphate there, 4 to 20. Okay, that's all based on the pH of your soil. So almost everybody in here is dealing with soils that are 7.5 and higher. So when you're putting down MAP or you're putting down DAP, you're only getting 10 to 20, maybe 30% of the total phosphate available, okay, because of that. The rest is going to rock almost immediately. Okay, so getting that in there, when we can do this in a foliar form, we can up in this area from more toward that 8 or 9 times more efficient by getting a phosphate source foliarly applied, okay? The other one we get asked a lot about is nitrogen, and we got asked it the other day on what helps me boost my wheat protein. So getting on a foliar application right at that heading time frame, so right at either flag leaf or flower with a protected nitrogen source. 1 gallon, if you're getting a pound and a half in a gallon in that situation, it's times 7. So it's like putting out 10.5 units of nitrogen right at that time frame. And that gets broken into aminos, and aminos raise the protein in your wheat. So, I mean, that's just a question that Todd got the other day when we were on one of the farms, and so I just wanted to point it out. So,
this is really one of the things you look at cost per ounce or cost per gallon of fertility inputs that you're going to put in a foliar. You're going to think, wow, that's super expensive. But really, we're talking about the efficiencies, comparing 4 ounces or 6 ounces of something versus 100 pounds of something on the same acre. When you think about it that way, when you think about it this way, that's where you're getting your fertility efficiencies and your economic gains from really the AeroSys program. A couple of quick notes just on foliar applications, as a whole. You really want to take into consideration, this is biology and other products as well. And again, Tom and Brad and Todd, they can help walk you through this. But time of day is important. This is ideal, like early in the morning, like when the stomatas are open, and you can get things into the plant a lot more efficiently. Avoid dry midday heat, especially in times of drought. So I'll go over this really quick, but Tom's going to talk about it more. When I talk about fertility efficiencies and why minerals and crop protection devices, the inputs are delivered better with the nanoparticle. So this nanoparticle is made of silica. It's in LiquiLife Plus. You can fill both inside and out this particle, and then the advantage really comes in terms of endocytosis. So once this is loaded, the old way to get minerals into a plant is osmosis or diffusion. The advantage here, the technology advantage here, is endocytosis. Once you have, whether it's fertilizer, crop protection, or whatever it is, inside that nano-sized silica particle. Endocytosis means it sits on the leaf surfaces, have a surfactant, so you can keep it on there, sits on the leaf surfaces, and the plant's leaves can envelop it into the plant in a much more efficient and fast way. So we're gonna talk a little bit about some system improvements, some advantages that your farmer's gonna get with nutrient density, and a little bit here on still the advantages of a foliar application. So we love it when we see benefits happening in more than just one area. We talk about yield, fertility efficiency, nutrient density, and then planter system health. I know that this will resonate with some people. Well, you can see a 43% increase in weight, that's gonna be yield, right? And that comes from the fact that you've got solid, not hollow. What is that solid? That solid is sugars and starches, right? These plants look the same from the road, but the weight comes from the inside. The inside is nutrient density. Sugars and starches mean you feed that to the dairy cow, you're producing more milk, you get better constituents. If you're a butter maker or a cheese maker, you want that milk. So you're getting paid for that. You're getting paid for non-fiber carbohydrates. This is fiber, right? This is non-fiber carbohydrates. And ultimately, you're gonna see the health of that herd increase because it's easier to digest. I think beets and alfalfa kind of stand alone in terms of payback, right? Because it's yield, it's sugar, and it's being one of the top producers in the area. So you can get this triple payback from a yield, nutrient density, plant health, fertility efficiency. We talk about system improvements like ROI this year and inching your farm to a little bit better place. This is a cool story. Remember, this was done in 2020. 2021, it went into small grain. 2022, it went back to corn. The grower just harvesting corn, and every time he got to this side of the field, the yield monitor bumped. He was 20 to 30 bushels more on this side of the field on corn, 2 years after the application. So why is that? It wasn't because the individual microbes that we put down 2 years ago, right? It was because 4 good cuttings and then a plow down that was better microbial food. So that whole system improvement there, that quality of your forage really, the quality of your cover crop, shallow incorporated into your soil. Here's another example. We did a trial, gentleman's from DeLong's, in 2022. Trial was pretty good. Again, we saw the same thing, yield, nutrient density, even saw the difference in terms of insects. But the next year, the agronomist is out in the field in the spring, just looking to see if he can make first cutting. And this is a whole year after the trial that was about nutrient density and yield. He's just out there, and I'm in my office, and he goes, "Steve, I'm standing on this field. Could I still see something from last year's application?" I said, I don't know, take a picture.
Not sure how well you can see this, but this was sprayed in 2022 by the Alpha Boost and by the Alpha CX1 after first cutting. And right here is the spray line, and then to the left side was not sprayed. Last year we saw significant increase in weight of the sprayed versus not sprayed, and a year later you can still see the line in the field. He's right there. This was sprayed.
So I have this in here simply because the point that I made earlier, return on investment this year and inch your way to a better place, inch your farm to a better place, making your soils more productive in the long run. It's a pretty good example of just that. So we'll talk just a little bit about tank partners. We're getting pretty close to the end. Am I all right on time?
Yep. Yep.
Okay. Good, better, best. You know, many of the inputs that we use today can be detrimental to biology. We look at this as if we can be making a 2 steps forward, 1 step back approach to the disruption of biology, then you're headed in the right direction. If you're making a 1 step forward and 2 step back, impacting your farm, then you're heading in the wrong direction. But insecticides and herbicides, again, we like to have liquid carbon or some kind of carbon in that pass. Mix them together first before you put into an insecticide or herbicide pass. Try to avoid fungicides. What you'll find some growers will do is they'll use a fungicide to kind of clean up the neighborhood and bring in the biology. We've seen this very successfully with potatoes and beets. If the program calls for 5 fungicide applications, you know, you can use biology to extend the duration between the applications, maybe get down to 4, maybe get down to 3. In some crops, you can even do more than that, but it depends on the crop and what you're battling with. This strategy, when you're using liquid nitrogen, this is a really good time to use the concept of in conjunction with, you know, you can add carbon and biology into your nitrogen applications. You lose less, we talked about this earlier, and you get more. Biology metabolizes the nitrogen into an amino form and facilitates plant uptake. The inclusion opportunity is replace 20% of your UAN with 10% biology and 10% carbon. So if you were using 30 gallons of UAN on a pass, think about a 20% reduction would be 24, 3 and 3. So same amount of gallons. When nitrogen was really high, this was about a wash in terms of cost. So same amount of gallons, comparable in price. And that's just gonna be a better mix because, you know, think about how long before that plant needs that nitrogen, you're applying that nitrogen, right? Some are doing it in the fall, freeze thaw, rain, time, like you're more apt to lose the nitrogen if you don't have carbon to immobilize it and biology to metabolize it. So I think last concept, before I turn it over to Tom, is I would make the case, people ask me, you know, should I use biology? And it's really about where should you spend your money? I would make the case the best dollar you can spend is to really identify a limiting factor in your farm. And assuming there's moisture, if minerals are not getting to the plant, the reason is either chemistry or biology. So there can be an excess or deficiency of a mineral. That's not a biological solution. That's a call Todd Ricard, and she's gonna call Tom.
Right away.
Find out that balance through your soil test and you know, address it there. But oftentimes minerals are tied up with a clay particle. A lot of muck soils where we are. Excessive chelation is an issue. And then salts, right? We talked about some of the negative impacts of the salts, but what a salt molecule really is this molecule that's all the exchange sites are full with an equal number of pluses and minuses, so it's got no energy. It just sticks there. For clay, chelation, and high salts, the solution is disassociation, reassociation, and then bioavailability. So this is just a depiction of your limiting factor. Again, whether that's, you know, clay, excessive chelation, salts. This limiting factor lacks energy. This limiting factor is holding you back. The concept first is disassociation. You need to break the molecule up, and there's 2 ways to do it. You can break the molecule up with organic acids. You can break the molecule up with biology. There are a certain category of microbes that thrive in high salt environments. They're called halophils. Other microbes will help that first step. So again, just a depiction. This is it when it's your limiting factor. this is now broken up. Sometimes these are gonna flush from the soil, sometimes they might leach. What you need to do now is reassociate them with something that's gonna be in your best interest. So, 2 ways to do that. You attach the molecule with something that has a cation exchange capacity. You know, we use calcium as the example because calcium is called the trucker of all minerals. What does that mean? That means that calcium can allow these particles to latch on and be taken to the plant in a positive sort of way. So what you really have done here is you've taken your limiting factor, you've broken it apart. That was once a fertilizer, and now those molecules can be taken back up to the plant. The other way is biology. We talked about this a little before. Digested carbon creates these bonds, and you are attaching these to digested carbon in a way that looks like this. So you're increasing your soil's organic carbon, and you're making this in a way that, again, biology can drive the exchange. Digestive carbon metabolizes, again, the process of going from an amino to a peptide to a protein. But most importantly, in both cases, once you've broken up and reassociated, uptake and exchange is driven by biology. This is the key, really, to bioavailability versus solubility. So when you say bioavailable versus soluble, soluble minerals become available to the plant independent of the plant's timeline, right? So they become available based on time, temperature, moisture, sometimes long before the plants can use them. This process is bioavailability. That's biology driving the exchange, and that's done in conjunction with the plants. So that's a wrap on what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to just point out a couple things, and I'm going to be here for afterwards or at the show if you want. What we did this year is we took what we determined to be the 5 greatest limiting factors on a farm and tried to find a LiquiLife Plus farm success story to address them. And these are in the handouts back there. First one is on P&K. I mean, there's some really interesting statistics here. One of the statistics published is that only 5 to 30% of the phosphorus that you put on your soil is going to get to the plant, right? You're nodding, you've heard that. What does that mean? That means you put $1 worth of phosphorus down and you're getting a nickel's worth of fertilizer. That's not very efficient from a fertility standpoint. This is why phosphorus through the leaf tissues might be a better option. But the really interesting thing here is that there's a whole bunch of calcium leaches, sulfur leaches, but P and K stay, right? You put that $1 worth down, 95 is getting tied up. It's in a vault somewhere, and there's a lot of phosphorus in your soil. It's biology that can get it to the plant. So really interesting story about somebody that's really found a way to get more phosphorus out of this organic pool of nutrients, this inorganic pool of nutrients. And I do want to caution, there's 2 of these, this one in particular and the nitrogen one, that this didn't happen in 1 year. So this is a baby step, baby step, baby step, to get to this place. 3 of these happened in 1 year in 1 application. So the P&K one, some of you might have seen his story before. This is a really good farmer near Ribbon, Wisconsin. Literally went from 10,000 gallons of UAN to 3,500 gallons of UAN on a 700-acre farm. Fertility efficiency. But he also went from being able to he's a dairy farmer. He went from having to feed his dairy cow 18 pounds a day of the corn silage to 12 pounds a day. That is a reduction of 33%. 33% of those acres were opened up for cash crops. When we talk about the invisible contributions to the bottom line, that's significant. I mean, he'll make the case at his field days. He doesn't see disease pressures anymore. I mean, it's just a whole systems approach to better farming. This is crop residue. Really an interesting, when you look at just how much minerals are, and there's, how many people have a crop residue issue here? Probably not as many as in most cases. So it's an interesting, there's just so much minerals that are available in that residue from the previous year's crop. If you can get that back in your system, good things happen. High salts, we kind of talked about that just a little bit ago, breaking up the limiting factor. And then what's often interesting to a lot of people is the whole discussion about disease pressures and pathogen control, and how biology can work to make your system more resilient from, add good biology and your plants have a better chance of protecting themselves. So 5 different kind of what we deem to be some of the biggest struggles that growers face. They're all back there in the holder folder if you want. Happy to answer any questions, but for now I'm going to wrap it up, and in case anyone has any questions, let me know.
Steve, thank you.
Rick, Helen has got questions.
So you work on the system and you try to get biology, everything working. Can you just touch on what are some of the main steps? When you talk about taking a step backwards, what are some of those main factors?
There are input selections and cultural practices. So, I mean,
Yeah.
the Latin word for kill is size, and I'm not being judgmental when we say this, because farmers need to use the tools in their toolbox, but there's a way to prudently use the right protection device input at the right time, and still have a way to re-inoculate your farm with biology, so that you can be making 2 steps forward and 1 step. I thought acres this year was more than ever, speaker after speaker after speaker after speaker. We're making the case that, I used to put this down on my farm and I would get something. Did you go to Acres?
Not this year.
All right, this is my hometown, so it's easy to get to. I used to put it down, I would get this. I'm putting the same thing down nowadays, and I'm getting this. I'm just not getting what I used to get out of my soil. And, for speaker after speaker said, you got 2 options. Bring animals back to the farm, which, I don't know, show of hands, how many want to do that? or re-inoculate with a broad spectrum. And that was the message over and over and over again, that we've done the unintended consequences of doing some of the things that you have to do, have set back the biology to some degree, and there's ways that we can re-inoculate and get to a better place.
So Acres Conference, just for those, because Lynn's probably the only one in here who knows what Acres Conference is other than you and I, Steve, from that standpoint, okay?
It's a conference like forward-thinking regenerative type farmers that are looking for like leaders that Gabe Brown was one of the speakers. You probably heard him. A lot of other high-profile farmers that are just starting to realize that there are ways that they can bring biology back to their farms to get more on their soil.
So, say you're gonna spray LiquiLife on an alfalfa field. Well, you spray it on the foliage, and in 3 weeks, you're gonna clip that foliage and you're gonna haul it off the farm. As opposed to, say, you sprayed it on your sugar beets and that foliage is gonna get turned back in. So should you be targeting the soil in that alfalfa situation, or how do you?
Great question. Great question. So, in alfalfa, if you're trying to establish a new crop, for those alfalfa, it's 4 or 5 years, and then you have to establish a new crop. How many years you get out of your alfalfa?
3.
3? Okay. So plant with alfalfa, plant biology with alfalfa if you establish a new crop. But if it's an established crop, what you do is right after first and second cuttings is when you apply it. So cut is really harming the plant.
Yeah.
And then you're coming in and you're putting, first you're addressing the wound, and then you're getting that plant back into productivity quicker.
Before it starts to regrow?
Yeah, soon as you can. I mean,
Follow the
it's
bailiff.
easy for me to tell you timing, right? When
Yeah.
I'm standing here, you gotta do what you have to do, but as soon as you can afterwards, that's when you apply it. And we've
Okay.
seen cases where, growers gone, because if they're an observational grower, they can shorten the duration between
Mhm.
cuts and get an extra cutting.
Sure.
We were on a farm last year up here where first time user, and it was 3rd or 4th cutting, and it was his neighbor harvesting the field. You say, you know what? I got all the alfalfa I need. I don't need my third or fourth cutting. So, you know, right after first and second cutting. First cutting is your best return on investment. Second cutting will be your second best return on investment. You know, do them both and you'll see that. But you're absolutely right. If you sprayed it and then hauled it away, you're not gonna see that.
But the first time you get moisture, it's coming off of the plant, okay? Because the methyllithium bacteria that are helping generate nitrogen, Lynn, are on the leaf.
Okay.
But then the first time, so in that 3 weeks, if you get no rain, yes, you're hauling it away. But if you get a rain or two in there, you will. But
It'll go to the soil.
it'll go to the soil, okay?
That is a terrific example of a critical growth stage.
Yeah.
Right, because that's
Yeah.
really critical, getting that plant back in. We did a trial in Missouri.
I have the results in my presentation.
Soybeans
Got hail.
got hail. 10 days after the hail, we came back with a foliar application. Because a lot of guys will turn to a fungicide, right? And we had a 7 bushel. It was a drought year, and then it wasn't a good trial. It wasn't a good trial, but there was a 7 bushel difference when you use biology right after the hail event rather than going to your fungicide. Critical growth stage, right? You get damaged or setback. That's a really important growth stage.
One of the things that happened last year, and Severin's here, that he can comment on it, but one of the things I'll present is basically whenever a plant goes through a traumatic situation, okay, so hail event, wind event, so for our beets, for cutting alfalfa, anything that we can then do at that moment with a very simple type of mix, which is basically a boron, LiquiLife, a food source, potassium to generate more sugars to help heal that plant, and then basically a copper to help with, because again, copper is one of the 3 heavy metals, copper, manganese, and zinc. So a lot of the beet guys in here use manzate, which is manganese and zinc together, okay, or copper. Those are your 3 majors. When you can do that immediately after a cut or after a hailstorm, you will see that traumatic healing faster than you'll see with a fungicidal program, because you're now getting all of the biology stimulated and going on that plant. So we experienced that in Kansas, we experienced it up here. It works to get that plant to regenerate itself as fast as physically possible from that standpoint. Gary.
You talked about critical growth stages, V5 for corn, you talked about weather. What other critical stages is there for other crops?
Yeah.
And where do you find that?
Yeah. Well, I would turn Severin. I bet if I asked you what's the critical growth stage in beets, I bet you're gonna have an answer.
Gary, you've got your critical thought process on, which is leaf, 8 leaf, right? That's when you can kind of now sleep at night, you've told me.
Yeah.
When beets hit 8 leaf.
And once the harvest this week, don't worry the whole time. But I mean, we've done it, but you know, we put it down, not in furrow, but in 2x2 on the side, and so obviously emergence is a key thing, but we've done it foliar too, and you know, Tom was talking about too, where we had a field that got hailed out, and we had done, I guess, maybe the older way of thinking, where we'd done maybe a fungicide or different treatment, and Tom came up and he's like, I want you to try this out here, and I think I was a little skeptical, but we had a neighbor right across the road who was in 10 days ahead of us, and his were a little further along, and he didn't do anything, and I think Tom came up a week later, and it was the most amazing thing I think of all summer. We saw how quickly it was able to kind of bounce back and recover, and you kind of figure when they get essentially mowed off in the middle of summer, you're going to lose sugar. I mean, that's just a given. And it ended up being above the company average, and we had to start out from almost zero. You know, these were pretty much eaten into the ground, so it made us a believer from that standpoint.
Yeah. I would say for soybeans, V1 and R1 are kind of those critical growth stages. So
V4.
I'm sorry, V4.
V4 and R1.
Are
On dry beans and on
yeah.
soybeans are your 2 critical growth stages.
One of my missions this year.
Wheat, yeah. Is there any such a thing as wheat?
Wheat is if you're just before, if the plant isn't jointed yet, Gary, then basically there's really no, so right at jointing, so just as you're starting to throw the wheat sheath, and then again at flag. Those are your two criticals on wheat from that standpoint. So it's just like V4, V5 in corn to get your kernel, your kernel girth and kernel length, and then your R, basically you're at tassel. VT is your other critical on corn from that standpoint. Okay, and we can list them all out. There's if you go on and do an AI search for it, you'll find whatever crop you want. It'll tell you the most critical growth stages that are in it from that standpoint.
Potatoes are like first and second hilling is when we would recommend getting back in there with the fertility program. One of my missions this summer is to do exactly what the assignment, what you just asked is my assignment for the summer, so next year I'll stand up here and I'll be able to give you an answer on more crops.
But I think that's, so if you get hit, in that V8 timeframe on beets, that's a critical piece that you've got to turn it around. Or the windstorm that hit last year, for everybody. That was right in that critical V6 to V8 timeframe, and that was why a lot of beets were set back for weeks. Okay, I don't remember how many years ago, Todd, it was now, but Grand Forks got like 12 inches or 8 inches of rain, and all the beets, so it would have been 20 or 19.
Yeah, four or five. Yeah.
Right. So again, but that was right at basically the beets were just starting to bulk. Okay, so there's your other critical time frame, and they got all this moisture. Okay, once we got the water off and we were able to fly, the first thing we did was get copper back on that plant with Nano K. Okay, on those beets, because the copper helped protect the cracks, the vestibular cracks that happen in the leaf because of the flooding or hail, whatever. It's like putting iodine on a cut. Okay, it's not necessarily going to stop an infection completely, but it's going to sure help. Okay, and then the potassium is what's critically important because it drives sugar, bricks, and once you get the bricks going, it's what generates sugar in beets. So it generates weight in corn, weight in beans, stops the cracks in in dry beans. It's just a critical piece that's there. Okay.
Just a follow-up question, okay, you said 7 to 14 days before those.
Right.
Why that?
Well, that gives, a chance for the plant to gain the benefit of that little bit of growth in advance of that really important stage. It's hard to, it's a concept that you're not gonna hit, every time, but I'll give you an example, in the fruit and wine industry, when they're about to get an overnight frost, they'll do biology in a fertilizer application. Do you know why? Before they get a little sugar boost. That's a
Sweeter.
antifreeze. So we've seen this. I have a great picture from Kansas where the grower, out of winter, put the biology on one side of his field and not the other, and then there was a dip down, the temperature dipped down across, and the side of the field that didn't have the biology was really you could see the damage of the flag leaf in the head, and then the side of the field that he had biology on, it powered its way through that. So I have to believe that it's exactly that same thing. Nutrient density, nutrient density from that standpoint helps. Girth, having a stronger stalk means that the pathogens can't penetrate it. All of those things can contribute to plant health. But I say that like it's an exact science. It's not, and I'm sure you can, as a grower, I'm sure you can appreciate that. But that's just kind of in general. Like if you can get enough time, pathogen control is exactly that too. White molds and things like that. If you can get it on there in enough time that the plant can benefit from that, then it'll just have less stress.
But that's why with Nano K, it's critical to have it for 28 days on beets ahead of harvest because you have to get that potassium to get through all of it and get it to make that sugar in that beet by that time. Okay, so if you're doing this, you're not processing it, you're getting the plant to produce the sugar. If we can get it out there, that's 7 days. With nano, we get it in quicker than others, but if you were using straight up potassium acetate, it'll take the 14 days because it's 1 ion at a time. And I'll give you an example of that. But when you're in this, you have to give that plant enough time to get it self-re-healed, get it to re-come back, you know, from this. Yeah. That's why it was 7 to 10 days after that, you know, after a hail, you know, you kind of just leave it alone. So the dry bean guys in here that have been around that's got enough gray hair remember Cobra from the old days, or, you know, soybeans from Cobra, okay? You know, in my world, we just called it the go on vacation herbicide because once you sprayed it, you went on vacation for a week because you didn't want to look at the field, okay? But then your landlords were calling us saying, hey, what in the heck did you do to this field? Because I've got a portion of it, type of thing. So from there, okay? That's where these things work, so.
Thank you, folks. Thank you again.